Content. We're going to start with a session about the PRWeek Boston University Communications Bellwether Survey. This is something we introduced last year, actually, for our 20th anniversary in PRWeek US, and it's rapidly become one of the de facto surveys of the sector, and we thank Boston University for their partnership with that. It's become one of the most credible and comprehensive surveys in the industry, and this year it showed that organizational purpose and ethical reputation is extremely meaningful to respondents. So this session is going to bring together Boston University researcher, Professor Donald Wright, and practitioners from the PR industry to dig into the data and discover why purpose is so important within organizations for both internal and external reasons. So I'd like to welcome to the stage to discuss this Madeline Chadwick, who's VP of Communications at Papa John's International, Pete Marino, who's Chief Public Affairs and Communications Officer with Miller Coors. He's also President of 10th and Blake, the craft beer company at Miller Coors, and Professor Donald Wright from Boston University. So please welcome them to the stage. So Don, kick us off by sort of talking about the main points of the survey. It's 1,600, more than 1,600 people responded, so it's a really credible piece of research. Tell us what the main findings were.
Well, as you know, this is the second year that, trying to get the slide to come up, maybe needs to, there we go. This is the second year that we've done this survey, and as you pointed out, ethics and purpose came up very high in the results. One of the things that this study does, it asks a lot more questions than comparable surveys. So many of the surveys that are done to kind of judge the state of the public relations communication industry, many of those studies only ask 35 or 40 questions. We ask over 100. And the plan is to continue doing this year after year, and then taking a look at how things change over time. Well, the real, I think, highlights this year were that a lot of people talking about integration. More than half of the 1,600 plus respondents work in departments or functions that are integrated, and more than half of the people who are in integrated functions are very positive about how it's working. There are also findings relative to the importance of ethics of an organization for people wanting to work for that organization, and a few other things. The key skills we asked about, as you would probably expect, writing continues to come out as number one. Last year, listening was number two. But this year listening dropped to number four. Crisis communication was in there along with the creativity. But those numbers are all, the differences are minimal. That the 55% of the client side people from our results report being either somewhat or fully integrated with the marketing function. There are some differences between what the communication people, how they feel they're being perceived, and how these communication people feel that the marketing people are being perceived. If you're interested in this study, there's a premium edition that has, we only have something like 15 or 20 minutes to talk about this morning. The premium edition, it goes on for pages and pages and tables and tables and tables, and that's available off of the PRWeek website. I think I've touched on many of the top
ones. Go to prweek.com if you want to check out the survey and the premium edition. Madeline, from your point of view as a CCO and a practitioner, what were the things that struck you from the survey particularly?
Yeah, I thought it was not surprising, but interesting about the feelings people had about having access to the CEO and kind of reporting structure and how critical that is for comms functions. And, you know, from my point of view, the companies I've worked for that value communications the most typically have CEOs who are great communicators. It really has to come from the top. And I think that if you have that, the reporting structure almost doesn't matter. You know,
and that's, the results showed that too. The results, it was like access to the CEO was much more important than the reporting relationship was. And the only factor that changed there was age. So as respondents got into their 50s and 60s, sort of in the age bracket where they might be becoming a chief communication officer for a Fortune 200 company, then that reporting relationship became more important. But to the bulk of the respondents, they focused more on, do we have access to the C-suite?
Do we over-obsess on that, Madeline, on the reporting structures, or is it important to report direct to the CEO?
Yeah, again, I think it depends on the organization. You know, it's not new to everyone here that there's always a debate about where communications fits, because we're probably one of the few functions that actually works with every single organization across the company. So HR thinks they have ownership, marketing thinks they have ownership, and you know, like I said, I think it comes from the top. So if the CEO is a good communicator, and I don't mean in that he's on the media every day, it's that he spends time thinking about his or her personal communication, especially with employees, they've worked on their communication skills, then I typically find that the whole organization has an appreciation for what the function does.
Yeah, and we'll be hearing from a CEO later from Danone US, so Mariano Lozano, so we'll see what he's got to say. Pete, from your point of view, you're heading the comms function, but you're also heading a business unit. What were the things that really struck you from the report this year?
I thought there was an interesting commentary about pace and speed with which you've got to be able to respond, and I think that actually links back to how you need to be structured. So I'm a huge believer that comms needs to report to the CEO, because I think it needs to be on par with the other C-level functions. Where I think it has the biggest impact is during times of crisis or when different things are affecting the business. If the comms leader is not on the same level as the legal leader or the HR leader, and if they're reporting into those people, I think that you can ultimately get to the wrong comms outcome. And I think that you saw that happen during the United crisis a few years ago. And so I think that in order to respond fast, which I think you absolutely need to be able to do today to respond to the speed of news and when people are pressuring you to have a response, I think the organizational structure helps enable that in a huge way.
Yeah, and why do you think so few CCOs sort of take that leap into the C-suite in terms of running a business unit like you've done, like maybe Stacey Tank at Home Depot? Doesn't seem to be many people doing that. Is there a reason for that?
Well, I think it's more just inertia, and I think you're seeing more people starting to have a reporting relationship directly to the CEO, and I think as that continues to expand, I think you'll see more comms leaders going into business units.
Yeah, and what's the biggest sort of change for you in doing that? Well, you're still doing both jobs, but...
I mean, the business unit job is really all about accountability to actual business performance and results. So in a comms function, you're accountable for the communications of the company, but now I'm actually tied and accountable to direct business performance in my segment.
Yeah. So Don, the subject of this conference is purpose. What did the survey tell us about purpose in terms of the comms function?
Well, that just some bullet points that purpose drives the PR comms strategy significantly more than it drives the marketing strategy. That although most of the client-side organizations that responded have a clearly articulated purpose, there's concern about whether the purpose is widely understood throughout the organization, not only at the top, but also at the, with the hourly worker and so forth and so on. That those would be the two main purpose, the two main findings relating to purpose.
Madeline, at Papa John's, how is purpose infused through the company, and what role does communications play in that?
Yeah, so, our company's only 30 years old and grew very quickly. So I think things like purpose were not really a conversation people had, because when you're growing quickly and, you're selling a lot of pizza, you don't kind of stop to think about those things. But in the past year, we have almost an entirely new executive leadership team. We have almost half of our board is new. And so we actually have now spent a lot of time thinking about our purpose, and have really, as a leadership team, took a step back and thought about, why should people show up to work every day? What's our role in the industry? And that's work that we're currently doing. And we have a new CEO as of about a month ago. So we did roll out purpose and values not too long ago, but he's new, so he's got to put some thought into that as well. But we think about that a lot. It's really critical.
Yeah, clearly you had some reputational issues with your former CEO. So how have you made that transition, and how are you doing that and making sure you're rolling out a good reputational basis for the brand moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, the unfortunate thing, and a lot of companies have been through this, but when you have kind of one person who made a mistake, that reflects on the 120,000 people who work at the company, which I don't think people think about that a lot. They don't think about the employees every day who show up and, it really had nothing to do with that, and kind of see a different company. So we've really focused on telling the stories of the 120,000 people who work in the company. We have actually, one of the big things we learned going through an issue like that is how critical the employees are, and how critical employee and internal communications is. And we actually centralized internal communications for the first time. It had been kind of spread out through different organizations. And so now I almost think of our employees as our most important communications audience, because if the employees are proud to work at the company, then they're serving your customers well, they're delivering on the business strategy, and almost everything we do fuels employee pride. That includes, earned media, things that we do in PR, especially when you have a disparate workforce of hourly employees all over the world. They're almost getting information better from the media than they would from, email. A lot of them don't have email or even access to the internet at work. So, it kind of, for me, reframed almost what our core focus should be in communications, and that's our team members.
Pete, you were drawn into a social media spat earlier this year with Budweiser after the Super Bowl, the controversy as it became known. And you were actually dubbed, it got personal with you as a CCO. You were dubbed ye olde CCO by Budweiser. How did you handle that, and how do you decide how to respond? And also, what do you think the impact is on your staff at Miller Coors? When they see that going on social media, this is all being played out in public.
I mean, I think what we try to do as a company is similar to what Madeline does. We want to make sure that our employees are knowledgeable about our brands and can then promote and support our brands. Whether they then promote and support and defend our brands in times like that, we want to make sure that everybody's got the right fact base and the information to support the right way. When they do that as individuals and not on behalf of a corporate handle, if you will, we want to make sure that it's clear that they're doing that on behalf of themselves, but they are defending something that they feel passionate about. And so I think that's what you saw more than anything during that time period.
Don, moving on to another section of the research was about PR agencies and the disruption they're facing. What was the main sort of findings from the survey about that?
Well, essentially, we continued to find what we found a year ago, but even into a greater detail, that the agencies are facing more and more competition. As we all know, the days of the agency of record are pretty much behind us. We're finding that agencies are pitching on projects rather than on AOR. But there's competition for the traditional public relations communications firms. There's competition from not only the boutique, the smaller specialized firms, but also from the major consulting companies, McKinsey and that group. So it's a very interesting time in the growth and development of agency public relations as we've known it.
Yeah. Pete, how are you utilizing agencies to help you in your work?
Yeah, we still have largely an AOR relationship. And what we always value the most is creativity and that sense of partnership which develops over time. The reason we valued the AOR is because our AOR agency, they understand our business very, very well. And so the quality of the ideas that they're presenting to us are shaped by that understanding of the business, what's going to work and what's not going to work. Beer is obviously a very regulated industry. There's a lot of stuff that agencies will pitch to us that don't know the business, that in 1,000 years you can't do for various reasons. And so the power of the partnership for us is that they understand our business, they understand the rhythm of our company, and they give us ideas that are not only creative, but also that are realistic.
Yeah.
And so that's very valuable to us.
Madeline, what about at Papa John's? How are you using agencies and how's that changed over time?
Yeah, so, as we, as communications professionals, join the C-suite, I think we have a fiscal responsibility, just like every other leader, to make sure that we're spending our money efficiently. And so I think that's probably why you're seeing a lot of disruption is, we always have to constantly evaluate what makes sense for us to do internally for, efficiency standpoint, and then what makes sense for us to use partners for. So, I'd say similar to Pete, strategy and creativity is critically important. I spent 15 years on the agency side, and then when I went in-house, I realized how quickly you lose perspective when you work on one business, and I really value our partners just to bring outside perspective, to bring best practices, to be a sparring partner. I mean, I don't have someone else who does communications at my level internally, and I need people that I can talk things out with. So I think there's always going to be a role, and just how that role fits into the model will continue to flex as we kind of optimize our budgets and our spend.
Yeah. Do PR agencies push back enough? Like, I often think that creative agencies, if they present something and the client doesn't like it, they might go to war a little bit, whereas PR firms maybe go away and come back with another idea. How do you find the difference between the PR and creative approach?
Yeah, I think it's dependent on the client. I mean, I want people to push back on me. I don't think I have every good idea. I think I have some good ideas, but and some ideas I fall in love with and I want to move forward with. But I want that. I want to do the best work. That's what motivates me. So I'm looking for partners who are going to push back on me.
Yeah. I'm going to open it up to questions. Has anybody got questions they'd like to ask the panel about the research or the role of the CCO in Miller Coors or Papa John's? Stick your hand up if you do. If not, I'll ask another question. Happy to do that as well. One trend we've seen lately is some companies actually getting rid of their CCO, getting rid of that position. Other companies getting rid of the CMO position and the CCO taking on more responsibilities. I'm thinking of maybe Johnson & Johnson or Uber. And then GE and Cargill have got rid of the CCO position. Do you think that is a trend? Or there's something's changing here, or is that just really down to individual organizations and individuals and companies? Pete, what do you think?
I can see how there are in certain sectors and certain companies where there'd be a tendency to move towards that, but I hope that it doesn't become a trend that we're starting to see more often, because I think the depths and levels of communications are much different than a marketing organization is going to typically only think about consumers. Typically. The communications function has to think about such a broader array of audiences that I think it is specialized enough that in more places than not, they should remain separate.
How about you, Madeline?
Yeah, I can't see a world where that could possibly happen. I just think communications has become so critically important with so many more stakeholders than we've ever had and so many more channels. I mean, our company's in a turnaround right now, and our CEO believes that communications is critical. I mean, you have to be able to communicate well to your employees to make sure they're delivering. There's got to be a consistent message. It's got to be compelling. We got to be clear, and we have to repeat it over and over again. And I think only really the communications function has the ability to do that well.
Sure. Don, what do you think about that? About the future of the CCO role?
I think it depends on the organization, and I mean the examples that you gave are very good, but there's a huge difference between, say, a Cargill and a company like Kraft, because Cargill is privately owned, it's not publicly traded, and so forth and so on. So it might work there, whereas it might not work somewhere else. But over time, I mean, 2019 or 2018 is not the first time these kinds of situations have developed over the years. You can go way back with that. I think it also depends a lot on what the CEO believes and what he or she considers to be the right team to move the needle for whatever the organization is.
Yeah. Don, just to finish us off, why is research so important? Why is it important to have credible research into the sector? And how do you want this study to develop over time?
Yeah, I mean, the real quick response is that, for years I've been saying if it doesn't involve research and evaluation, it's not public relations. It might be publicity, it might be press agentry, but it's not public relations and corporate communication if we don't measure on the front end, measure on the back end. This partnership that we have between Boston University and PRWeek is very unique because there's lots of surveys out there, but very few of them are asking 100 questions. Very few of them have, some of the people that work on our full-time faculty, the reason we can get so many high-level responses is when you've got people like Ray Kocher and Gary Sheffer and Mike Fernandez making the calls saying, you're going to get this survey, would you please fill it out? We've been able to get, often surveys of this nature are filled out by the summer intern or something like that. This research on the academic side, we've had 2 papers accepted through a peer review process. We have a published article coming out as a result of it. I think it helps PRWeek and Boston University be able to stand together saying we're doing something that's going to make our business better tomorrow than it is right now.
Okay, well, we certainly value the partnership, and we appreciate the work you do in partnership with us. Do check out the research at prweek.com. There is a premium edition, as Don mentioned, and it's really worth downloading. It's a fantastic piece of work, a lot of data in there to inform practice. Thank you so much to our first panel of the day. Thank you, Madeline, Pete, and Don.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's fun.